"Salute me," the Duchess said, and the whole forecourt seemed to lean in to hear how I would obey. I did not obey. I want to be precise about that, because in the days that followed every version of this story but mine got something wrong, and the wrong things have a way of hardening into truth if no one who was there sets them straight. So let me set them straight. I am Corporal Edrin Vael of the household foot, third file of the morning watch at the King's Stair of Harrowgate Palace, and on the morning the Duchess of Carrowmere commanded me to lift my hand to her, I stood with my rifle at the order, my eyes fixed on the middle distance above her shoulder, and I did nothing at all. That is the whole of it, if you want the bones. A great lady gave me an order I was forbidden to follow, and I followed the order I was sworn to instead, which in that moment meant being a statue, while a woman who had never in her life been refused anything raged at me across 6 feet of swept granite. The crowd thought I would crack. The Duchess was certain of it. I confess there was a sliver of an instant, somewhere in the long middle of it, when I was not certain myself. But the bones are not the story. The story is everything that pressed down on those bones while I held still, and what it cost to hold, and who in the end stood up for a soldier who could not stand up for himself. So I will tell it slowly, the way it happened, from the cold gray dawn that gave no sign of what the day intended. I came on at the change of the guard, a little before 7, when the mist still lay along the lower terraces of the palace gardens, and the gilded points of the great gates wept with it. The King's Stair is the broad ceremonial flight that climbs from the inner forecourt to the east doors, the doors the royal family uses when they go out among the people, and it is, by the reckoning of the household, the most exacting post a foot soldier can hold. You stand on the 3rd step from the bottom, on the left of the flight as one looks up, in a niche cut for the purpose between 2 stone urns older than the kingdom's last 3 wars. You do not move. You do not speak. You hold your rifle at the order, but grounded, hands crossed upon the muzzle, and you keep your eyes level and forward, and you remain, for 2 hours at a stretch, more monument than man. It is not as easy as the tourists think, and it is not as hard as they fear. The hardness is not in the legs, though the legs ache. It is in the mind, which wants very badly to be somewhere a mind can rest, and which you must teach, over months, to lie down quietly inside the body and wait. My old color sergeant, a barrel of a man named Holt who trained half the household foot then living, used to say that a guardsman's true weapon was not the rifle but the stillness, and that any fool could be taught to fire, but it took a particular kind of man to be taught to wait. I did not understand him at 19. I understood him completely by the morning I am telling you about, which was my 11th year on the king's posts and my 4th at the Stair. I tell you all this so you will know what the post was, and what it asked, before the Duchess came and asked something else. The morning began as 1,000 mornings had. Sergeant Maddox formed us up in the guardroom under the east wing, ran his eye down the file, found a thumb of brass dull on Private Ashby's pouch, and said 3 words about it that left the boy scarlet and the pouch gleaming, and marched us out across the forecourt to relieve the night watch. The relief is its own small ceremony, the words of it old as the Stair, and we went through them as we always do, the night men handing off the posts, the day men taking them up, and then the night men marched away and the forecourt was ours and the long stillness began. For an hour nothing. The mist burned off slow. The household servants crossed the far side of the court on their morning errands, careful, as they always are, to keep their distance and their hush near the posts. A flock of the gray doves that nest in the clock tower came down to walk among the cobbles and went up again at some signal of their own. The light strengthened. By 8 the gates were open to the public, as they are each day the family is in residence, and the first of the visitors came drifting in along the rope lines, cameras up, voices low at first, the way people lower their voices in a great church before they remember they are allowed to speak. I had seen 10,000 of them. They come to see exactly what I was giving them, the immaculate man who will not move. They stand close, just past the rope, and they watch, and some of them try to make me smile or flinch or look at them, and I never do, and that is the whole transaction, and they go away satisfied that they have seen the thing they came to see. I bear them no grudge. There is something in people that needs to test a wall to be sure it is a wall, and I am, on that step, a wall. It is an honorable thing to be, a wall between the disorder of the world and the order of the house behind me, and I had long since made my peace with standing for it. The Duchess of Carrowmere did not come with the visitors. That was the first wrongness, though I did not name it as such at the time. She came down the inner drive in a long dark motor car with the small standard of her house fluttering at the wing, and the car stopped at the foot of the stair where no car is permitted to stop, and a footman of the palace, not one of ours, one of the household indoor staff, a thin, anxious man named Pell, whom I knew a little, sprang to open her door as though his life hung on the speed of it. I knew of the Duchess. Everyone in the household knew of her by then, because she had been 3 days in residence as a guest of the crown, and in 3 days she had made herself the chief subject of the servants' hall. She was a cousin of the royal house at some distance, second cousin to the late king, I had heard, which made her a sort of great-aunt to our young Princess Malin and Prince Joran, though the blood was thin, and the connection more a matter of pride than of love. She came from Carrowmere in the far north, a county of cold moors and a colder family, and she came, the talk went, because Queen Saralind in her kindness had invited every branch of the old kin to the midsummer rites, and the Duchess had answered the invitation as though it were a summons she had been waiting her whole life to receive. She was perhaps 60, tall, very straight, dressed that morning in deep plum with a high collar and a hat that cost, I would wager, more than I am paid in a season, and she moved the way the very certain move, as though the ground had been laid down expressly for her feet and would answer for it if it failed. She had a face that might once have been handsome and had settled instead into a kind of permanent displeasure, the mouth drawn down, the eyes quick and cold and forever searching for the thing that was not as it should be, so that she might correct it. I have met the type. The palace is full of the type on its bad days, but I had never met one so distilled. She came up the lower steps with Pell trailing and a maid behind the maid, and at the third step she stopped, because at the third step on the left stood I, and I had not, of course, acknowledged her because I do not acknowledge anyone. That is the post. The post does not see dukes or dustmen. The post stands. She stopped and she looked at me, and I felt the look the way you feel a draft from an open door, a change in the air, a coldness arriving. And then she did a thing that visitors sometimes do, the bolder ones, the ones who have had too much sun or too much wine or too much of their own importance. She stepped close, closer than the unspoken line, close enough that I could smell the violet of her scent, and she tilted her head and studied my face as though I were a horse she was thinking of buying. "Do you know who I am?" she said. I said nothing. My eyes stayed level. A man at the rope line lowered his camera, sensing something, the way crowds always sense it first. "I asked you a question," the Duchess said, and her voice had risen a degree, the way a voice rises when it has never once not been answered. "I am the Duchess of Carrowmere. I am kin to the crown of this realm. And when I pass, I expect to be acknowledged." Still I said nothing, because there was nothing I was permitted to say, and because, I will be honest, I had already understood, somewhere below thought, where this was going, and I had begun, somewhere below thought, to set my feet. She drew back half a step and looked me up and down, the rifle, the tunic, the bearskin, the gloves, and something curdled in her face, some old grievance finding at last a thing small enough to spend itself on. "You will salute me," she said. And the whole forecourt leaned in to hear how I would obey. I must stop here and tell you what those 4 words meant, because to a visitor they sound like nothing. A vain woman wanting a little theater, a soldier asked to lift his hand. Where is the harm? The harm is in the orders, the standing orders of the King's Stair, written in a hand 200 years dead and unchanged since, are very plain on the matter of the salute. The sentry of the stair renders the salute to exactly three things and no others: to the sovereign when the sovereign passes, to the royal standard when it is borne by, and to the dead at the appointed hour of remembrance and on the passing of a coffin of the household. To no one else. Not to ministers, not to generals, not to ambassadors, not to the children of the king themselves, much as I love them. I do not salute Princess Malin when she skips past me with her nurse, though it half breaks me not to, and she knows it, and we have a game about it, but that is for later. The sentry of the stair does not salute on demand. To do so is to make the highest honor of the post a thing that any loud voice can purchase, and a salute that any voice can purchase is worth nothing, and an honor worth nothing dishonors the thing it was meant to honor, which is the crown. This is not my opinion. It is the order, and the order is not a small thing or an arbitrary thing. It is the distilled wisdom of 2 centuries of men who stood where I stood and learned, sometimes the hard way, what happens to a guard who can be made to bend. The order exists so that the stair means something. The order exists so that when the sovereign does pass and the salute is rendered, it is rendered because the sovereign is the sovereign and for no other reason on earth. So when the Duchess of Carrowmere said, "You will salute me," she was not asking for a small vanity. She was asking me to break 200 years of the order, to spend the crown's honor on her hat, and to do it in front of 40 strangers and a thin frightened footman and a maid and a sky full of the clock tower's doves. She did not know she was asking that. To her it was nothing, a due, long owed, finally to be collected. That is the thing about the powerful that the powerless understand and the powerful never do. They do not feel the weight of what they ask, because nothing they have ever asked for has weighed anything to them. I held still. I kept my eyes above her shoulder, on the worn place in the balustrade across the court where 10,000 gloved hands have rested over 200 years. I let my mind lie down inside my body the way Holt had taught me, and I waited. A second passed, 2. The forecourt had gone very quiet. Even the doves, I remember, had stopped their walking. "Did you hear me?" the Duchess said. The certainty in her voice had a hairline crack in it now, the first I would put there and not the last. "I gave you an order, salute me, at once." I did not move. There is a particular silence that comes over a public place when the crowd realizes it is watching something real instead of something staged. It is different from the hush of reverence and different from the hush of fear. It is the held breath of people who came for a show and have just understood that the show has stopped following the script, and that what happens next is not in anyone's hands. I had heard that silence twice before in 11 years. Once when a drunk man had climbed the rope and laid his hand on Private Geddes' rifle, and once when a small boy had got loose from his mother and toddled to the foot of the stair and sat down on the bottom step and begun, for no reason any of us ever learned, to weep. Both times the silence had meant the same thing. The wall the crowd had come to lean against had become, suddenly, a man, and no one knew what a man was going to do. I felt that silence settle now, and I understood that the morning had turned, and that I was at the center of the turning, and that there was no longer any version of the next few minutes in which I came away unmarked. That is the thing I want you to feel before I go on. I knew, standing there, that I had already lost something. Whatever I did now, the morning would have a story in it, and the story would have my name, and a guardsman with his name in a story is a guardsman who has failed at the first and oldest task, which is to be no one, to be the post, and not the man. I had failed at that already, simply by being the thing she had chosen to break herself against. Nothing I could do would give me back my anonymity. All I could do was choose what kind of name I would have when it was over. So I chose the only name I could live with. I chose to be the order. I kept my eyes level. I kept my hands crossed on the muzzle. I let her words break over me like water over a stone, and I gave her nothing back, not a flicker, not a breath, because the order said the salute belonged to the crown and to the dead and to the standard, and the Duchess of Carrowmere was none of those, however near she stood to them by blood. "I see," she said at last, and the 2 words were colder than the granite. I see what kind of man holds this post. A common soldier who imagines his little ritual lifts him above the obligations every other servant of this house owes its blood. You think your stillness makes you grand. It makes you nothing. It makes you a doll in a costume, and I have given a doll an order, and the doll will obey. She turned her head a fraction toward the footman. Pell, tell him who I am, tell him what I am owed. Poor Pell. I have thought of him often since. He was a good servant and a frightened man, caught between a guest of the crown who could, with a word in the wrong ear, end his place, and a sentry of the Stair whom he had no power over at all and whose orders he half understood and wholly respected. He took a step forward, wringing his thin hands, and he said, in a voice that wanted to be anywhere but in his own throat, "Your Grace, your Grace. I, the gentleman, is on the king's post, your Grace. He is not permitted." "Is not permitted," the Duchess repeated and made the words a sneer. "He is not permitted to acknowledge the kin of the crown. What a strange house this has become. In my grandfather's day, a soldier who failed to salute a lady of the blood would have been flogged at the gate and turned out by nightfall." She looked back at me, and now there was something hungry in the cold of her, something that had found its quarry and meant to run it down. Perhaps that is what this house needs, a reminder of what is owed to whom. Very well, stand there, be your doll. I will see how long your little ritual lasts when the Queen herself hears how her sentry treated her kinswoman at the very foot of her stair. And there it was, the first turn of the screw, the first of the day's escalations, named aloud. She would go to the Queen. She would make of my stillness a complaint, and she would dress the complaint in the language of insult and disrespect, and she would lay it before Queen Saralind as a matter of the dignity of the blood. And I, a corporal of the household foot with 11 years and a clean sheet, and not one soul of rank in the world to speak for me, would be weighed against a duchess in the scales of the court. I want to tell you I was not afraid. It would be a finer story. But I had a wife, Anwen, and a daughter of 6, Bess, who thought her father was the bravest man in the kingdom because he stood guard over a real live princess, and a mother in the almshouse at Greyford whose keep I paid each month from a corporal's wage, and the whole fragile structure of our small good life rested on the post I held, and the post I held now hung, suddenly, on the temper of a woman who had decided to be insulted. So yes, I was afraid. I held still, and I was afraid, and the holding still was harder for the fear, and I think that is worth saying, because the men who tell you they felt nothing are either lying or were never really tested. The stillness is not the absence of the storm. The stillness is the storm held. She gave me one last look, a long one, the look a person gives a thing they intend to come back and finish. And then she swept up the remaining steps, her plum skirts hissing on the granite, the maid scuttling after, and passed in through the east doors, which the indoor staff opened before her, and was gone into the body of the palace. The crowd let out its breath. The doves came down again. A woman at the rope line said to no one, "Well, I never," and somebody laughed, the high nervous laugh of people releasing tension, and the mourning on the surface of it resumed. But it was not resumed. I knew it was not resumed. I stood my remaining hour on the stair with my eyes level and my hands crossed and my heart going like a drum, and I thought about Anwen, and about Bess, and about Holt, who was 12 years dead, and whose voice I could still hear saying that the stillness was the weapon, and I waited for the morning to do whatever it had decided to do to me. I did not have to wait long. Sergeant Maddox came for me at the change of the watch, which was right and ordinary, except that he came himself on foot, ahead of the relief, which was neither. Maddox was a square, hard man of 50 with a face like a closed door and a heart, well hidden, that I had reason over the years to know was sound. He marched up to the foot of the stair, and he did not look at me because you do not look at a sentry on his post, but he said low, in the flat voice he used for the things that mattered most, "Corporal Vael, relief's behind me. When you're stood down, you're wanted in the controller's office. Now, brush yourself first. Word's already up the wing." "Sir," I said, the first word I had spoken since I came on watch, and it came out cracked. I heard what she asked, Maddox said, still not looking at me, his eyes forward like mine. I heard what you did, or rather what you didn't. A pause, the length of a breath. You stood right, Corporal. Whatever they tell you up there, you remember a sergeant of 30 years told you stood right. Now go and stand right in front of the controller, because that's a harder post than this one, and there's no urn to hide in. The relief came down. The small ceremony was made. I handed off the stair to Private Ashby, whose brass now gleamed, and I marched away across the forecourt under the eyes of the crowd that had watched me refuse a duchess, and I went up to learn what it would cost me. The controller of the household is the man who runs the great machine of the palace below the level of the family themselves. The staff, the stores, the ceremonies, the discipline of every servant and soldier within the walls. His name was Sir Brannock Hale, and he was not a soldier but a courtier of the old grave kind, a tall stooped man with a long careful face, and a way of folding his hands and waiting that could draw the truth out of a stone. He was not unkind, but he was the keeper of the smooth running of the house, and a corporal who had become the chief subject of the morning's talk was, to him, first of all a thing that had stopped running smoothly and must be made to run smoothly again, whatever that took. His office was in the east wing, 2 flights up, a high-paneled room with tall windows that looked down on the very forecourt I had just left, so that as I stood before his desk at attention I could see, far below and small, the bearskin of Private Ashby in the niche on the 3rd step where I had stood an hour before. It is a strange thing to look down on your own post from above. It made the stair look very small, and the whole quarrel look very small, and for a moment I could not understand how a thing that looked so small from up here could weigh so much. Sir Brannock let me stand at attention for a while before he spoke. That was his way. Then he said, Corporal Vael, you know why you are here. Sir, the Duchess of Carrowmere has lodged a complaint. A formal one in writing within the hour, which is, I may tell you, remarkably fast work, and suggests a person who came down those steps already composing it. He glanced at a paper on his desk. She says you ignored her, refused to acknowledge her as kin of the crown, and declined a direct instruction to render her the courtesy of a salute. She uses the words insolence, contempt, and a deliberate and public humiliation of a lady of the blood. She requires, is her word, your immediate removal from the king's posts, and a formal apology rendered to her by you in person before the assembled household. He set the paper down and folded his long hands and looked at me. What have you to say? I had spent the hour on the stair deciding what I would say, and I found, now that the moment had come, that I could say it plainly, because it was only the truth and the truth needed no decorating. Sir, I said, the Duchess required me to salute her. The standing orders of the King's Stair permit the sentry to render the salute to the sovereign, to the royal standard, and to the dead at the appointed times and on the passing of a coffin of the household. To no one else, sir. Not to ministers, not to the household's own officers, not to the children of the crown. I am not permitted to salute the Duchess, sir, however near she stands to the blood. I held my post, and I rendered the courtesy the post permits, which is the courtesy of standing it perfectly. I meant her no insolence, and I showed her none. I stood the order, sir. That is all I did. Sir Brannock was quiet for a time. The clock on his mantle ticked. Down in the forecourt the small bearskin of Private Ashby did not move. I know the orders of the stair, Corporal, he said at last, and there was something in his voice I could not at first read. I have known them longer than you have been alive. You are correct in every particular. The sentry of the stair does not salute on demand, and a corporal who saluted a guest because she shouted at him would have committed a far graver fault than the one you are accused of. On the law of the post, you are without blame. I want you to hear me say that, because what I am about to say next does not change it. He rose and went to the tall window and looked down at the forecourt, and I understood then that he was a man caught, as Pell had been caught, between two duties, and that the catching pained him. The law of the post is one thing, he said, with his back to me. The peace of the house is another. The Duchess is a guest of Her Majesty, here for the midsummer rites, and she is, whatever you and I may privately think of her, a woman with a long reach and a longer memory and a great many ears at this court that owe her favors. She has decided to be wronged. A person who has decided to be wronged is the most dangerous thing in any house, Corporal, more dangerous than a thief or a fire, because she will not be reasoned out of it. She has too much invested in the wrong, and she has carried her wrong straight up the wing toward Her Majesty, and it will reach Her Majesty by this evening if it has not reached her already, and then it will no longer be your matter or mine. It will be the Queen's. He turned. His long face was tired. I have it in my power to make this small, he said. I can move you off the King's posts for a fortnight to the stores, the gate, somewhere out of her sight, and have a senior man render her a few smooth words about the regrettable rigidity of the standing orders, and let her feel she has won something, and let the whole thing sink quietly out of memory by the time she goes north again. No mark on your record, no flogging at the gate, whatever her grandfather's day was like. You would lose nothing but a fortnight of the posts you love, and the house would have its peace, and the Duchess would have her little victory, which costs us nothing because it is made of nothing. That is the wise course, Corporal. That is the course 30 years in this house has taught me to take. Do you understand me? I understood him very well. He was offering me the soft way out, and he was offering it to me as a kindness, and it was a kindness, and I have honored him for it ever since. He was telling me, bend just a little, just enough, and the storm passes over you. Let me dress your standing aside in words the Duchess can swallow, and you keep your record and your wage and your daughter's good opinion. And the price is only that the order of the Stair is quietly admitted, for a fortnight, to have been a regrettable rigidity rather than the spine of the post. It was the reasonable course. It was the wise course. And I want you to understand that I felt the pull of it like a hand on my collar, because everything I loved was on the other side of it, and all I had to do to keep them safe was to let a vain woman believe she had bent the Stair. Sir, I said, may I speak plainly? I would be disappointed if you did anything else. If I am moved off the post to soothe her, sir, then the order of the Stair has been broken after all, not by my hand but by the house's. Every visitor who saw me stand this morning, and every man of the foot, will understand the lesson, that the order holds until someone with enough reach decides it shouldn't, and then it bends. And the next sentry of the Stair who is shouted at by a great lady will know that the house does not stand behind the order, and he will salute, because why should he be flogged for a thing the house itself does not believe in? And the salute of the Stair will be worth a little less, and then a little less, until it is worth nothing, and the crown is honored by a courtesy any loud voice can buy. I would rather take the flogging her grandfather would have given me, sir, than be the corporal who taught the Stair to bend. I will not apologize for standing the order, and I would ask, with respect, sir, not to be moved as though I had done a wrong, because I did not do a wrong. I did the only right thing the post allowed. The clock ticked. Sir Brannock looked at me for a long moment with those careful gray eyes, and something moved behind them that I could not name then, and have decided since, was a kind of weary admiration. The admiration of a man who has spent 30 years making the wise compromise for a man young enough still to refuse it. You are either a very stubborn fool, Corporal Vael, he said at last, or you are exactly the sort of man this house should be built of, and I have lived long enough to know they are frequently the same man. He sighed, a long sigh, and sat back down behind his desk. Very well. You will not be moved, and you will not apologize because you have done no wrong, and I will not be the man who pretends you have for the sake of a quiet evening. But understand what you have chosen, Corporal. You have chosen to let this go up to Her Majesty unsoftened. The Duchess will tell her story, and you will not be in the room to tell yours, and Her Majesty will decide. I cannot tell you how she will decide. I can tell you that the Duchess is blood and you are a corporal, and that the world is not always built the way the orders of the Stair say it should be. You may have just thrown away 11 good years for a principal. Go home, Corporal. Tell your wife nothing yet. Report for the morning watch as usual. And pray, if you are a praying man, that the queen of this realm is the woman I have served for 15 years, and not the woman the Duchess takes her for." I saluted him. Him I was permitted to salute, the small permitted courtesies of rank, and I turned and marched out, and I went down through the great house and out across the forecourt past my own small post, and I went home to Anwen and Bess, and I told my wife nothing as I had been bid, and I lay awake the whole of that short midsummer night listening to my daughter breathe in the next room, and I prayed, though I am not much of a praying man, that the queen was the woman Sir Brannock believed her to be. That was the first day. The matter might have ended there, soft or hard, and become a small thing the servants' hall forgot in a week. It did not end there. It got larger every day for 5 days, and I will tell you how. The second day, the Duchess came down to the stair again. She came at the same hour in the same long dark car that stopped where no car stops, and she came up the lower steps with the same maid behind her, and she stopped, as before, at the third step and looked at me. But this time she did not come to give an order. She had learned in a single night that the direct order would not move me. So she came to do something cleverer and crueler, which was to make of my stillness a daily public theater of her contempt, and to wear me down not with one great blow but with 100 small ones, day after day, until either I broke or the house, weary of the spectacle, broke me to be rid of it. "Good morning," she said to me, pleasantly loudly, so the gathering crowd could hear, and of course I said nothing. "No, still nothing. How very dedicated. Do you know," she said, turning a little to take in the rope line, drawing the visitors into her audience, "this is the soldier who refused the kin of the crown a common courtesy. I am told he is permitted to acknowledge no one, not the family he serves, not the blood of the house. I am told he is a kind of furniture. I find it fascinating, don't you? A grown man who has made an art of being furniture." A few of the visitors, not understanding, not knowing me, laughed uncertainly. "Stand very still, furniture," she said to me, close again, the violet scent of her, the cold. "Stand very still, and perhaps no one will notice you are only a man playing at stone." And she went up and went in, and that was the second day's first visit. She came again at noon, when I had thought myself safe, having seen her once. She had no business at the east doors at noon. She came only to find me on my post and stand a while at the rope and watch me with that searching, displeased face, saying nothing now, only watching, the way you might watch a kettle you have decided to resent for not yet boiling. The watching was worse than the words. A man can let words break over him, but to be watched fixedly by someone who wishes you to fail for a quarter of an hour while you hold a stillness you may not break, that gets into the body in a way words do not. My hand wanted to move. My eyes wanted to drop to hers and tell her what I thought of her. I held. But I went home that second night more tired than a double watch had ever made me, the particular gray exhaustion of a man who has spent the day not doing the thing every nerve in him screamed to do. I had not told Anwen, but Anwen has been a guardsman's wife for 9 years, and she reads me the way the color sergeant reads a kit inspection, and on the second night she put down her sewing and said, "Edrin, what is it? And don't tell me it's nothing, because you've not slept and you've not eaten, and you've got the look you had the week before Bess was born, the look of a man waiting for a thing he can't stop." So I told her. I told her all of it, the order and the refusal and the complaint and the controller and the soft way out I had not taken, and I watched her face as I told her, because I had not taken the soft way out, and the soft way out was the way that kept us safe, and I had made that choice without asking her, and she had a right to be angry that I had wagered the family's safety on a principle without so much as a word to the woman who shared the wager. She was quiet a long time when I had finished. Then she got up, and she came and stood in front of me, and she took my face in both her hands, which she does only when she means a thing entirely, and she said, "Edrin Vael, If you had come home and told me you'd saluted that woman to keep your post, I'd have kept your supper warm and I'd have said nothing, because you're a good man and a good man does what he must for his family and there's no shame in it. But I will tell you the truth, since you've asked me with your face if not your mouth. I would have been sorry. I'd have spent the rest of my life a little bit sorry, and so would you, and so, in time, would Bess, though she'd never have known why. You didn't salute her. You stood the order. And whatever it costs us, and I know it might cost us everything, I'm not a fool, I would rather be the wife of the corporal who stood the order than the wife of the corporal who learned to bend. We'll manage. We always have. Now eat your supper and sleep, because you'll need both for whatever this woman does tomorrow. I have left out a great deal of my life from this account, because it is not the place for it, but I will not leave out that. A man who stands his post alone in the eye of the public is not, in truth, standing it alone if he has gone home the night before to a woman who tells him to stand it. I slept that second night. The third day I needed the sleep. On the third day the Duchess raised the stakes again, and this is the escalation I think of as the second turn of the screw, because it moved the quarrel out of the forecourt and into the body of the house. She had spent 2 days finding me an immovable wall on the stair, and so she stopped coming to the stair and began, instead, to work the court. She was a clever woman, I will give her that, and enemies do. She understood that she could not move me, but she might move the men who could move me. So she went among the court, at the dinners, in the long galleries, in the drawing rooms where the great families gather of an evening. And she told her story, polished now, refined by repetition into a small perfect grievance, and she told it to everyone who would hear, and a duchess with a grievance is heard by a great many people. I learned this, as a corporal learns everything from below, from Pell the footman who sought me out at the gate one evening, wretched with the burden of what he knew, and told me in a frightened rush that the Duchess was telling it all up and down the wing, Corporal, telling the Marchioness of Vael and old Lord Audric and the whole of the visiting kin that you spat on the dignity of the blood, and they're none of them fond of you for it. And there's talk, I shouldn't say it, there's talk she means to make it a test like, of whether the Queen will back her own blood against a common soldier, and they're all watching to see which way Her Majesty jumps. Because some of them have their own quarrels with the crown over the rights and the precedents, and they'd dearly love to see Her Majesty made to choose. That was the thing that frightened me most of all, more than the loss of my post, more than the flogging her grandfather would have ordered. It had stopped being about me. I had become a pretext. The Duchess and the disgruntled kin had found, in my refusal, a convenient field on which to fight a different and larger battle, a battle over whether the crown would side with the old blood or with the orders of its own house, a battle about precedence and pride and 100 old grievances that had nothing to do with a corporal on a stair. And a corporal on a stair, caught in the middle of a battle of that size, is not a man any longer. He is a flag the armies are fighting over, and flags get torn. I went home the third night and did not sleep, and Anwen did not tell me to, because she understood now too that it had grown past the size where sleeping helped. The fourth day the screw turned again, and this turn I did not see coming, and it is the one that hurt the most, because it reached past me to the thing I would have given my life to keep out of it. I must tell you now about Princess Malin, because she comes into the heart of this, and because she is the reason that what could have been only a story about a stubborn corporal became, instead, a story I am proud, in the end, to have stood inside. Princess Malin is the daughter of Prince Consort Aldric and the granddaughter of the late king, and she is, at the time of these events, 8 years old, and she is, I will say it plainly, though it is not a guardsman's place to have opinions about the family he serves, the dearest small person I have ever known. She has dark hair that escapes every ribbon her nurses tie it in, and a gap where she has lost a front tooth, and a way of running everywhere instead of walking that drives the household staff to despair, and a fierce serious heart hidden under all the running. She and her brother Prince Joran, who is 10 and gravely conscious of being 10, are the brightness of the place. And Malin, for reasons I have never deserved, decided some years ago that I was her particular guard. It began when she was 5 and got loose from her nurse. She has always been getting loose and found me on the lower posts and discovered to her vast delight that I would not move or speak no matter what she did. She made it her project to defeat my stillness. She pulled faces. She told me jokes, terrible ones, the jokes of a 5-year-old. She once, with great solemnity, balanced a daisy on the toe of my boot and stood back to see if I would acknowledge it. And I did not, though it half killed me. And she clapped her hands and declared me the best guard in the whole world precisely because I would not look at her daisy. We have over 3 years developed a game. The rule of the game is that I may not on my post acknowledge her. That is the real rule of the post, and I have never broken it, but that I am permitted, when I pass her in the corridors off duty, or when I am stood down and she comes upon me in the lower court, to be Edrin who knows her, and not the wall who does not. She understands the difference between the wall and the man better than half the adults of the court do. She taught herself the difference. She is, as I say, fiercely serious under all the running. I tell you this so you will understand what it did to me on the 4th day, when I learned what the Duchess had done. It came again through Pell, who by now had appointed himself my unhappy informant, creeping to the gate each evening with his cargo of bad news. He found me at the stand-down on the 4th day, and he was paler than I had yet seen him, and he could hardly get the words out. "She's gone at the little princess, Corporal," he said. "The Duchess. She's gone and pulled the little princess into it." The ground went out from under me. "How?" I said. "How has she, Pell? What has she done?" "It's the rites, Corporal, the midsummer rites, 3 days off now. There's the children's part of it, where the young of the house walk in the procession, and the Princess Malin and the Prince Joran are to walk, and there's a place in the order of it where the young ones pass before the assembled court and the kin. And the Duchess has got it about, Corporal, she's got it whispered everywhere, that since the household's own soldier won't show proper respect to the blood, it's a question whether the blood is being shown proper respect at all, in this house, under this queen, and She's let it be understood that she means to make a point of it at the rites before everyone, about precedence, about who bows to whom. She means to use the children's procession, Corporal. She means to stand on her precedence and make the little ones make the princess herself, give her some bow or courtesy in front of the whole court, to show the kin that the blood still keeps its place even if a common soldier won't, and to put the queen on the spot in front of all of them. And Corporal, the little princess, she's only 8. She doesn't understand any of it, and they're going to make her a piece in this woman's game, and it's all of it because of. He stopped. He did not say it. He did not have to. It was all of it because of me. Because I had refused a salute, the Duchess had found a lever, and she had worked the lever, and the lever had reached, by the 4th day, all the way to an 8-year-old girl who would be made to perform a courtesy. She did not understand to soothe the pride of a woman she had never harmed, in front of the whole court, as a public proof that the old blood still ruled, and all of it traceable, in a straight cold line, back to the 3rd step of the king's stair, and a corporal who would not lift his hand. I will not pretend I bore that well. I went home on the 4th night, and I sat in the dark of our small kitchen long after Anwen and Bess were asleep, and I held my head in my hands, and for the first time in 11 years I doubted the order I had given my life to. Because here is the thing the orders cannot answer. I had stood the order to keep the salute pure, to keep the crown's honor from being bought by any loud voice, and the keeping of it had set in motion a thing that now threatened a child. Was a pure salute worth that? Was the order of the Stair worth Malin made a pawn? I could end it all, even now. I could go up in the morning and find the Duchess and bend my stiff neck and salute her in front of whatever audience she liked, and apologize and grovel, and the lever would have nothing to pry against any longer, and Malin would be left alone. One lifted hand. That was the price. And against that price stood what? A principle, an order written by dead men, the purity of a courtesy. I came that close. I want it on the record that I came that close, because the men who tell you they never doubted are not telling you about a real test. I sat in the dark and I had all but decided to go up and salute her and be done, when I thought of one thing that stopped me, and the one thing was this, that if I bent now to protect Malin, I would teach her, that fierce, serious girl who had taught herself the difference between the wall and the man, that the order holds until someone makes it costly enough, and then it bends, and that the way to make a good man break is to threaten the thing he loves. I would be teaching her that the Stair could be bought, only the currency was not a loud voice but a hostage, and I could not bear to teach her that. She deserved a guard who stood the order even when it cost, because one day she would be a woman of the house herself, and she would need to know from somewhere, from someone, that there are things that do not bend, and that the people who hold them are not fools but the load-bearing walls of a decent house. So I did not decide to salute. I decided instead in the dark of that fourth night to do the only other thing I could think of, which was to find a way to put the truth in front of the one person in the kingdom with the power, and I prayed, the will to stop it. I decided to try to reach the Queen. I did not know then how impossible that is for a corporal to reach the sovereign across all the careful machinery of the court that exists precisely to keep corporals from reaching sovereigns. I was about to learn. The fifth day taught me. The fifth day was the day everything looked lost, and then, for a false bright hour, looked saved, and then was nearly lost again, worse than before, and I have to tell it carefully, because it is the hinge of the whole matter, and I have seen it told wrong more than any other part. I began with Sergeant Maddox, because a wise soldier begins with his sergeant. I caught him before the morning forming up and told him, low and fast, what Pell had told me, the children's procession, the precedents, the Duchess's plan to use the rights to put the Queen on the spot and make a pawn of the princess. Maddox listened with his closed-door face, and when I had finished he was quiet for a moment, and then he said something I have thought about many times since. "You want to take this to the Queen," he said. "It was not a question." "I have to, Sergeant. There's no one else who can stop it, and by the time it stops itself it'll be at the rights and the harm done. I have to get the truth to Her Majesty before the Duchess gets her version planted so deep it can't be pulled out." Maddox looked at me a long moment. "Corporal," he said, "you've been 11 years in this house, and you still think the truth gets to the Queen by someone walking up and telling her. It doesn't. There's a wall between the sovereign and the likes of us, and the wall isn't stone, it's people, secretaries and chamberlains and equerries, and the controller and 40 grades of gentlemen in between, and every one of them sees it as his whole purpose in life to make sure the Queen's day is smooth, and that no corporal's quarrel ever lands on her desk. That wall isn't there to be cruel. It's there because a sovereign who heard every quarrel in this house would drown in them. But it means that you, Corporal Vael, cannot reach the Queen, not by any door you're allowed through. The Duchess can reach her, she dines with her, she's blood, the wall opens for her. You can't. And there's the whole shape of the thing, isn't it? She can put her version in front of the Queen at dinner. You can't put yours in front of her at all. It was the bleakest moment of the 5 days, that bleaker than the controller's office, bleaker than the dark kitchen. Because Maddox was right, and I knew he was right, and I had no answer to it. The court was built, with great care and over centuries, to make exactly the thing I needed to do impossible. The Duchess had the ear of the Queen by right of blood. I had nothing but the truth and no door to carry it through. "Then what do I do, Sergeant?" I said, and I heard my own voice crack again, the way it had cracked once before in this story on the stair when Maddox first came for me. And Maddox, who was a hard man with a well-hidden heart, surprised me. "You don't reach the Queen," he said. "I can't get you to the Queen. But there's one person in this house the wall opens for who might carry your truth in if she chose to, and who can't be stopped by any chamberlain because she's 8 years old and she goes where she likes and nobody's worked out how to keep her out of anywhere yet." He almost smiled. "Your little Daisy girl, Corporal, the princess. She talks to her grandmother, to the Queen, every evening before she's put to bed. It's the one fixed thing in that wild child's day. The wall doesn't stand between Malin and the Queen. Nothing does. If the princess understood what was being done to her in her name and carried it to the Queen herself in her own words, that's a door no duchess can shut. I stared at him. Sergeant, she's a child. I can't use a child as I won't make her a piece in this any more than the Duchess has. That's the very thing I'm not telling you to use her, Maddox said, sharp. I'm telling you to tell her the truth and trust her with it. There's a difference, and you of all men know it. The Duchess means to use the princess as a prop in a ceremony, to make her perform a courtesy she doesn't understand for the sake of a grown woman's pride. That's using a child. Telling that same child the plain truth of what's being done, and letting her decide for herself whether to take it to the grandmother she loves, that's not using her. That's respecting her enough to tell her the truth. You said it yourself last night, you great fool, though you didn't know you were saying it. She deserves a guard who stands the order even when it costs, because one day she'll be a woman of this house. Well, maybe she also deserves to be told the truth and trusted to do right with it. Maybe that's part of standing the order, too. I have never forgotten that. I have turned it over 100 times. There is a line, fine but real, between using a child and trusting one, and the difference is whether you are making her a means to your end or telling her the truth and letting her be the author of her own act. The Duchess was over the line. Maddox was asking me to walk right up to it and not cross it. And I decided in that moment, and I have never been sorry, that I would tell Malin the truth, all of it, in words an 8-year-old could hold, and that I would tell her plainly that she did not have to do anything at all, that she was allowed to do nothing, that no one would think the less of her, and that whatever she chose to do or not do was hers and not mine. And then I would leave it with her. Because she was a person, small but entire, and she had a right to the truth of a thing being done in her own name. I found her that afternoon in the lower court off duty, the way our game allows. She was hunting for the clock tower doves with a fistful of crumbs she'd smuggled from the nursery, and when she saw me she lit up the way she always does and came running, and I knelt. I was off duty. I was Edrin and not the wall, and I told her I needed to talk to her about something serious. The most serious thing I'd ever talked to her about, and that I needed her to listen the way she listens when something really matters, the serious way, not the running way. And that fierce, serious heart under all the running came up into her face, and she sat down on the cold flag beside me and folded her hands in her lap and said, "All right, Edrin, I'm being serious. Tell me." So I told her. I told her about the Duchess and the salute and the order of the Stair. She knew the order, of course. She had spent 3 years testing it with daisies. And I told her, carefully, gently, true, that the Duchess was unhappy that I would not salute her, and that she had decided to make a point of it at the midsummer rites, and that the point she meant to make was about precedence and bowing, and that she meant to use the children's procession, and that Malin herself might be asked to make some bow or courtesy to the Duchess in front of the whole court, to prove that the blood still kept its place. And then I said the most important part, the part I had rehearsed all afternoon to be sure I got it right. And here is the thing, Malin, and you must hear it. You don't have to do anything about any of this, not one thing. This is grown-ups' trouble, and it's my trouble most of all, and it is not your job to fix it. If someone asks you to bow at the rites and you don't want to, you can just not, and that's allowed, and no one good will think the worse of you. And if you'd rather not think about any of it at all, that's allowed too. I only told you because it's being done in your name, and I thought you had a right to know the truth of it. That's all. There's nothing you have to do. She was quiet for a long time, looking at the doves, her small face working. And then she said a thing that I will carry to my grave, because it was wiser than the whole court put together. "Edrin," she said, "is the order a good rule, the one about who you salute?" "I think it's a good rule, Malin. I think it keeps the salute meaning something. And the Duchess wants you to break the good rule just because she's important." "Yes." And because you won't break the good rule, she's being unkind. And now she wants to be unkind to me too, to make grandmother sad. Something like that, yes. Malin nodded slowly, the gap in her teeth, the escaped hair, the whole serious small certainty of her. Then I'm going to tell grandmother, she said. Not because you told me to. You said I didn't have to. I want to. Because grandmother is the queen, and the queen should know when somebody's being unkind and breaking good rules in her house. That's her job. And it's my job to tell her because I'm the one who knows. She stood up and brushed the crumbs from her skirt and looked down at me with an expression so exactly like her grandmother's that it stopped my breath. You stood your good rule, Edrin, she said. I'm going to go and be brave like you and tell the truth. We'll both be brave. All right. All right, Malin, I managed. And she ran off, running again, always running to find her grandmother, and to do, of her own free choice, the bravest thing an 8-year-old ever did in that house. That was the false dawn. For one bright hour that evening I believed it was done. I believed she would tell the queen, and the queen would understand, and the queen would put a stop to the Duchess, and the whole nightmare would lift. I went home almost light. I told Anwen there was hope. And then late that night, Pell came to my door to my home, which he had never done, which frightened me before he even spoke, and he told me how it had gone wrong. It had not gone wrong with Malin. Malin had done exactly what she said she would do. She had gone to her grandmother at the bedtime hour, and she had told her in her own words the whole of it, gravely and well. That part had gone exactly right, and I bless that child for it still. What had gone wrong was the Duchess, who was cleverer and faster than any of us, and who had a way of turning every blow against her into a weapon. She found out, Corporal, Pell said, standing wretched on my doorstep with his hat in his hands. She found out the little princess had been to the queen. There's not much happens in that house the Duchess doesn't get word of. She's bought half the indoor staff with her tips and her flattery, and she's turned it clean around. She went to Her Majesty herself, this very evening, after the child had gone to bed, and she's told it that you put the princess up to it. That you, a common soldier, used your influence over the little girl, your games with her, all of it, to turn a child of the house against her own blood and set her telling tales to the queen. She's calling it the worst thing yet, Corporal. She's saying a soldier who'd manipulate a royal child to fight his own battle for him is a soldier who's no business anywhere near the children of the crown, let alone on the king's posts. She's demanding you be turned out of the household altogether, not moved, not stood down, turned out this time and barred from the children. And she's saying, oh, Corporal, she's saying that the very fact the child defends you proves how deep you've got your hooks in her, and that it's a kind of poison, an unsuitable influence over a little girl, and the word she used, Corporal, the word's gone all round the wing tonight, the word is sinister. I had to put my hand on the doorframe. Anwen came up behind me in the dark hall and took my other arm. It was, I understood at once, the cruelest and the cleverest thing the Duchess had done, and the most dangerous by far. She had taken the one good thing, a child telling the truth out of love, and she had poured filth on it, and turned its goodness into evidence of a crime. And the genius of it, the black genius, was that there was no clean way to answer it. If I protested that I had not put Malin up to it, that she had chosen freely, well, that is exactly what a manipulator would say. If Malin herself insisted that no one had made her do it, that she had wanted to, that only proved, in the Duchess's telling, how thoroughly I had captured the child's heart. The truth itself had been made to serve the lie. Every honest thing I could say in my defense had been turned, in advance, into further proof against me. It was a trap built so that the harder I struggled, the tighter it drew. And worst of all, immeasurably worst, it had taken the cleanest, bravest act in the whole sorry business, a little girl going to her grandmother to say someone was being unkind, and made of it something shameful, something sinister, a thing the child would, if it stuck, grow up wishing she had never done. The Duchess had not only attacked me, she had reached into the one pure place in the story and tried to poison it at the root. I did not sleep that 5th night, and Anwen did not pretend that sleep would help, and we sat together in the dark kitchen until the gray midsummer dawn, and I will not tell you everything we said, because some of it is ours, but I will tell you the shape of where I came to, because it matters for what followed. I had no move left. I saw that clearly in the long dark. I could not reach the queen. The door I had found, the child, had been turned into a weapon against me, and to use it again would only deepen the charge. I could not answer the lie, because the lie was built so that every answer fed it. I could not even defend Malin's brave act without making it look worse. The controller's soft way out was long gone. I was now to be turned out altogether, and barred from the children, which meant barred from Malin, which was its own particular grief on top of all the rest. Every road was closed. The Duchess had, in 5 days, built a fortress of grievance with no door I could enter and no wall I could breach. And somewhere in the gray hour before the dawn, having seen that every road was closed, I came to the only ground I had left, which was the ground I had started on. I could not win. Very well. I could still be true. I could not stop the Duchess. I could not reach the Queen. I could not clear my name or undo the poison poured on a child's good act. But I could still, on the morning of the rites, stand my post correctly, render the salute to whom the order said and to no one else, and let the truth of what I was be visible in the only language a guardsman has, which is the language of how he stands. If they meant to turn me out, they would turn out a man standing his post correctly to the last minute of it. If the Duchess meant to make her point at the rites, she would have to make it in front of a corporal who, whatever they said of him, was demonstrably, visibly, undeniably doing his duty exactly as the orders prescribed, no more and no less. I had no weapon but the stillness. Holt had told me long ago that the stillness was the weapon. I had not understood him at 19. I understood him now in the gray dawn of the worst morning of my life, that when every other power has been stripped from a man, the way he holds himself is the last thing they cannot take, and that a man who stands correctly while they destroy him says a thing about the rightness of his cause that no speech could say. I would lose, but I would lose standing the order. And maybe this was the only hope I had left, and it was a thin one. Maybe someone who mattered would see it. So when the morning of the midsummer rites came, I put on my dress tunic, and I kissed Anwen, and I knelt and held Bess a moment longer than usual without telling her why, and I went up to the palace to stand what I believed would be the last post of my life. I did not know that the Queen had been awake in the night too. I did not know what an 8-year-old had set in motion, or what a wise woman does with the truth when a child brings it to her and a Duchess tries to poison it. I knew none of that. I only knew the order and the stillness, and that I meant to hold both to the end. I will tell you now what I did not know then, what was happening on the other side of the wall, in the rooms a corporal never enters, while I dressed for my last watch. I have it from those who were there, pieced together over the years since, and I set it down because the part of this story that redeems it happened where I could not see it, and you should see it even though I could not. When Princess Malin came to her grandmother on the evening of the 5th day, she did not come the way a courtier comes, with a polished grievance. She came the way a child comes, climbing onto the long settee in the Queen's private sitting room and folding her hands and saying, "The staff who were near tell me, Grandmother, I have to tell you a serious thing, and it's true, and I want to tell it by myself with no one helping me, because I'm the one who knows it." And Queen Saralind, who is, I will say now and have earned the right to say, the finest sovereign this realm has had in living memory, not because she is grand, for she is not grand, but because she is good and she is wise, and she has never once in 15 years forgotten that the whole point of the crown is the people it serves. Queen Saralind set down whatever was in her hands, and turned to her granddaughter and said, "Then I shall listen to all of it by yourself. With no one helping you, tell me your serious thing." And Malin told her. She told her about the order of the stair and the daisy game and the difference between the wall and the man. She told her about the Duchess wanting me to break the good rule because she was important, and about my standing the good rule even though it was costing me, and about the Duchess being unkind, and about the plan for the rights and the bowing, and being made a piece in a grown-up's game. And she told her, "This is the part I cannot read aloud without stopping," she told her grandmother. And Edrin said I didn't have to do anything, grandmother. He said it lots of times. He said it wasn't my job and I could do nothing and no one good would mind. But I wanted to tell you. Because you're the queen and the queen should know when someone's being unkind and breaking good rules in her house. That's your job. And it's my job to tell you because I'm the one who knows. So now I've done my job. What are you going to do about yours? They tell me the queen laughed at that, not unkindly, a laugh with tears very near the back of it, and gathered the child in and said, "I am going to do my job, my brave girl. You have done yours beautifully. Now leave mine to me." And she sent Malin to bed, and then she sat alone for a long time, and then she sent for two people. The first was the controller, Sir Brannock Hale, and she asked him for the plain facts of the matter on the stair, and he gave them to her plainly, as is his nature, including, I learned this only long after, and it humbles me to set it down, including his own account of our conversation in his office, and his own judgment which he did not soften, that I was without blame on the law of the post, and that he had declined to pretend otherwise, even when pretending would have bought the house a quiet evening. He told her, he said, exactly what he had told me, that I was either a stubborn fool or exactly the sort of man the house should be built of, and that he had lived long enough to know they were frequently the same man. And the queen, he said, was quiet for a moment and then said, "And which do you think this one is, Brannock?" And he said, "I think, ma'am, that he is the second sort, and I think I have grown so used to making the wise small compromise that it took a corporal half my age to remind me what the orders are for." And the queen said, "Yes, it takes one of those now and then. Thank you, Brannock. You did right not to pretend." The second person she sent for, late as it was the Duchess of Carrowmere. I was not there, and Pell was not in the room, but the Queen's own dresser was near the door, and the substance of it has come down to me, and I believe it true because it is exactly the woman I have served. The Duchess came expecting, I think, to receive her victory, to find the Queen at last brought round to the side of the blood, ready to turn out the insolent corporal and put the order of the stair in its place. She came in full sail, the dresser said, and began at once on her grievance, the insolence and the contempt and the public humiliation, and now, the worst of all, the sinister soldier who had poisoned a royal child against her own kin. And the Queen let her finish. That was the thing the dresser remembered most, that the Queen let her say all of it, every word, and did not interrupt, but sat very still and listened, with a stillness, the dresser said, that began after a while to be unnerving, the way my stillness on the stair had begun, after a while, to unnerve the Duchess. And when the Duchess had at last run dry, the Queen said, in a voice the dresser described as terribly quiet, "Are you finished, cousin?" And the Duchess said she was, and the Queen said, "Then it is my turn, and you will extend to me the courtesy of hearing me out that I have extended to you. For I am the one person in this realm to whom you genuinely owe a courtesy, and it is the first one I have seen you acknowledge since you arrived under my roof. You came to my house," the Queen said, "as a guest, for the rights of midsummer, which are rights of the whole realm and not a stage for the vanity of one branch of one family. And in 5 days you have made of my house a theater for your offense. You commanded a sentry of my stair to salute you. He could not, because the orders of that post, orders older than your dukedom, cousin, forbid it, and forbid it for a reason you have spent 5 days proving the wisdom of. Because the moment the salute of the stair can be commanded by any loud and self-important voice, it ceases to honor the crown and begins instead to honor whoever shouts loudest. And I will not have the honor of my house made into a thing the proud can purchase by being unpleasant. That soldier stood his orders. He stood them under your insults, which I am told you dealt him daily for the entertainment of tourists. He stood them when you carried your grievance through my court, and tried to turn my own kin into a faction against me. And he stood them, this is the part, cousin, on which you have most badly misjudged both the soldier and me. He stood them even when he might have ended his suffering in an instant by simply lifting his hand to you, which is what a smaller man would have done on the first morning. He chose, instead, to keep faith with an order that protects the dignity of this crown, at terrible cost to himself, for 5 days, asking nothing. That is not insolence, cousin. That is the rarest and most valuable thing a crown can possess, and most crowns die never having found it. A servant who keeps faith with the institution even when the institution cannot, in the moment, protect him. I would not trade one such man for 100 of the courtiers who have spent this week deciding which way I would jump. And as for the child, here the queen's quiet, the dresser said, went quieter still, and colder the way the deepest water is the coldest. You have accused that soldier of poisoning my granddaughter against her own blood. I will tell you what happened, since you were not in the room and I was. My granddaughter came to me of her own will and told me the truth, and told me 3 times over that the soldier had said she need not, that it was not her job, that she could do nothing and no one good would mind. He gave her every door out, cousin, and she chose, an 8-year-old, to walk through the hard one, because she had decided that telling her queen when someone is being unkind in her house was a job worth doing. That is not poison. That is the cleanest courage I have witnessed in this house in a year, and it shames every adult who has been playing politics with her future this week, and it shames you most of all, who have now tried to take that child's one brave true act and call it sinister, to twist a little girl's honesty into a weapon against the man who taught her by example what honesty costs and why it is worth the cost anyway. You reached into the one wholly good thing in this whole sorry affair and tried to befoul it. I will not forgive that quickly, cousin. I am not certain I will forgive it at all. You wished, the queen finished, to make the rites a test of whether your queen would side with the old blood or with the orders of her own house. Very well, you shall have your test. But you shall have it in public before the assembled court at the rites, as you wished. Only the question that is answered there will not be the one you posed. Be present tomorrow, cousin. Stand where the kin stand, and watch. And she dismissed her. The Duchess of Carrowmere went out, the dresser said, white as her own pearls, having come in to collect a victory and gone out not understanding, yet, that she had instead been handed a sentence and merely told the hour of its execution. And the queen sat alone again and sent for one more person before she slept, and that person was Sergeant Maddox, of all the men in the household, summoned at midnight to the queen's presence, where no sergeant goes. And what she asked him and what he told her, and what she then arranged for the morning, I did not learn until it unfolded in front of me at the rites, in front of the whole court, where I stood waiting to be turned out and was instead. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me come back to the Stair, and to me, who knew none of this, and who put on his dress tunic on the morning of the rites believing he was dressing for the end. The midsummer rites at Harrowgate are the oldest ceremony of the realm, older than the present house, older than the present palace, a thing of such weight that even people who care for nothing else of the old ways stop their work to watch it pass. The court assembles in the great forecourt and on the King's Stair and along the processional way. The family comes out through the east doors and descends the stair to the dais at the foot of it. There are the old words, the old music, the standards of the household and the colors of the realm, and at the heart of it the children of the house walk in their place in the procession, bearing the small green boughs that are the sign of the renewing year. It is beautiful. I have stood it 10 times. On the morning I am telling you of, I expected it to be the last ceremony of my service, and I had resolved to stand it perfectly, so that whatever else they said of me afterward, no one could say I had not stood my last post correctly. I was posted that morning where I am always posted, the 3rd step, left of the flight, in the niche between the 2 old urns. The whole assembled court could see me. The whole assembled kin could see me. The Duchess of Carrowmere, when she took her place among the kin to the right of the dais, could see me, and did, and I felt her cold eye find me and settle, and I understood that she had come to watch me be destroyed, and I set my own eyes level on the worn place in the far balustrade, and resolved to give her, to the very end, the perfect stillness that had been the one thing she could never take. The forecourt filled. The court in its finery, the kin in their pride, the great families ranged along the processional way, and beyond the gates, held back at the rope lines, the crowd of the realm, the ordinary people come to see the rites, cameras up, the same crowd that watches me every day, only vast now, a sea of faces. The bells began. The old music started. And then the east doors opened at the top of the stair, and the family came out into the summer light, and the whole forecourt rose. Queen Saralind came first, as she always does, in the green and silver of the rites, and Prince Consort Aldrich beside her, and behind them the children, Prince Joran grave and careful at 10, bearing his green bow exactly so, and Princess Malin beside him, who for once was not running, who was walking in her place with a small fierce dignity that made my throat close, and who, as she came down the stair past my post, did not look at me, because she knew the rule, my brave girl. She knew that on my post I am the wall and not the man, and she kept the rule even now, even with everything that hung on the day, and the keeping of it by an 8-year-old when grown dukes could not keep theirs is a thing I will love her for as long as I live. The family descended to the dais. The old words began, and it came in time to the part of the rites the Duchess had chosen for her stage, the presentation, where the young of the house pass before the assembled court and the kin acknowledge them, and the order of precedence is, in the old symbolic way, displayed. This was where she meant to act. This was where she would stand on her precedence and require the courtesy, and put the queen on the spot in front of the whole realm, and make her point about the blood and the order and the insolent soldier who had started it all. But the queen acted first. Before the presentation could begin in its accustomed form, Queen Saralind raised her hand, and the music stopped, and the forecourt went into that held silence I have spoken of, the silence of a crowd that knows, suddenly, it is watching something real. And the queen, standing on the dais at the foot of her own stair, in front of the assembled court and the kin and the sea of her people, did a thing that was not in the order of the rites, a thing no one expected, a thing that I, on my step 30 feet away, did not understand until it was nearly upon me. She turned and she looked up the stair, and she looked directly at me. "Before we proceed," the queen said, and her voice carried, clear and unhurried, to every corner of that great court, "there is a matter I will settle here in front of you all, because it has been conducted in front of you all, and it is right that its settling be public too. You have most of you heard," she said, "some version of an affair concerning a sentry of my stair and a guest of my house. You have heard it, I have no doubt, in many shapes, for it has been told in many shapes, and some of the shapes were made to wound. I will now tell it in its true shape, once, so that there need be no more shapes after today. 5 days ago," the queen said, "the Duchess of Carrowmere commanded the sentry of this stair to salute her. He did not. He did not because the standing orders of this post, orders older than my reign, older than my house, permit the sentry to render the salute to the sovereign, to the royal standard, and to the honored dead, and to no other person living, however high. Not to ministers, not to generals, not to the kin of my blood, not," and here she paused, and I saw her glance just for an instant at her granddaughter standing small and straight on the dais, "not even to the children I love more than my crown. The sentry of this stair salutes the crown and the dead and nothing else, so that the salute means the crown and the dead and nothing else, and cannot be bought by any voice loud enough to demand it. That is the order. It is a good order. It has been a good order for 200 years, and it was a good order 5 days ago, and the man on that step kept it." The silence in the forecourt was absolute now. I stood my post. I kept my eyes level, but I will not pretend my heart was level. It was going like the bells had gone. "He kept it," the queen said. though he was insulted for keeping it daily and in public for the entertainment of strangers. He kept it though a faction of my own court was raised against him. He kept it though it threatened his place, his livelihood, and the bread of his family. And he kept it. Her voice did not rise, but it sharpened like a blade turned to catch the light, though he could have ended every particle of his own suffering at any moment of those 5 days by the simple expedient of lifting his hand. One small surrender and the storm would have passed over him, and he would have kept his comfortable place, and only a thing made of nothing, the meaning of a salute, would have been lost. He declined. He chose the meaning of the salute over his own safety, and asked nothing, and expected, I am told, to be dismissed for it this very morning, and came none the less and stood his post correctly so that we might have our rights. I have ruled in my time on many matters, the Queen said, and I will tell you that I have rarely been prouder to rule than I am of what I am about to say. The sentry of my stair was right. He was right on the first morning, and he is right on this one. He kept faith with the honor of this crown when keeping faith cost him everything and bought him nothing, and that is the very definition of the loyalty a crown exists to deserve and so seldom does. I will not have such a man dismissed. I will not have him reproved. I will not have one word more said against him in my house by anyone of any blood. She let that settle, and then she said very simply, I will instead do what I have it in my power to do, which is to honor him. And then she did the thing that Sergeant Maddox had been summoned at midnight to make possible, the thing I had not understood when she sent for him, the thing that I have never been able to speak of since without my voice betraying me. The Queen turned to her controller, Sir Brannock Hale, who stood at the edge of the dais, and she said, clear and formal, the old words, Sir Brannock, is the standard present? It is, ma'am, said the controller, and at his signal the bearer of the royal standard, who stands always near the family at the rights, came forward and dipped the great standard of the realm, the very standard that, by the order of my own post, is one of the only 3 things on this earth I am permitted to salute. Corporal Vael, the Queen called up the stair to me by my name in front of the assembled court and the kin and the sea of the people, and the use of my name was itself a thing, for the sovereign does not commonly know the names of corporals. You have stood your orders. Render now the salute your orders permit to the standard of the realm, that all here may see what the salute of this stair is, and to whom it belongs, and that it belongs to no one who can merely demand it. I understood then. I understood the whole of it in a single flood. She had found the one way to make my vindication out of the very thing I had been condemned for. She had brought out the standard, the thing I was permitted to salute, and she had commanded me, as my sovereign, whose command on this matter I was sworn to obey, to render the salute to it in front of everyone, so that the court would see with their own eyes that the salute existed, that it was a real and living honor, that I had never been a doll, who could not salute but a soldier who saluted the right things and only the right things, and so that the Duchess, and all the kin who had backed her, would see the salute they had demanded for vanity given freely and fully to the crown it actually belonged to, and would understand at last and in public the difference between the two, which is the whole difference between honor and pride. I came to attention. 11 years and 4 years on the stair, and 5 days of holding still under the worst the court could do, and now the one moment, the permitted moment, the moment the order was made for. I brought my hand up in the salute of the household foot, the slow, full ceremonial salute, to the dipped standard of the realm, and I held it, and I have been told by people who were there that the whole forecourt held its breath while I held it, the thousands of them, the court and the kin and the people at the gates, all of them watching a corporal salute a flag, and understanding, every one of them, exactly what they were watching. Not a man obeying, but a man whose obedience had a shape and a limit and a meaning, giving the salute to the only thing that had ever truly owned it. And as I held the salute, I heard, we all heard, a sound begin at the rope lines beyond the gates, where the ordinary people stood, a sound that swelled and rolled forward across the forecourt and up the stair and broke over me where I stood. The people, the realm, beginning to applaud, not the polite applause of a court. The deep rolling thunder of thousands of ordinary people who had understood, without anyone explaining it to them, that they had just watched something true, that a great lady had tried to make a soldier's honor into her plaything, and that the queen of the realm had stood up in front of everyone for the soldier and the honor both. They applauded the salute. They applauded the queen. They applauded, I have to believe, the simple visible fact that in this house on this day, the right thing had been done in the open where everyone could see it. I held the salute through all of it, my eyes level, my arm steady, and I will not be ashamed to tell you that behind the level eyes I was weeping, the slow, silent tears of a man whose whole soul has been wrung and then, against every expectation, redeemed. The queen let me bring the salute down, and then, into the rolling applause, she turned at last to where the Duchess of Carrowmere stood among the kin, white-faced. Her victory turned entirely to ash in front of the whole realm, and she said one thing more, and she said it not cruelly but with a terrible clear finality. "Cousin, you asked whether your queen would side with the old blood or with the orders of her own house. You have your answer. I side with what is right, which on this day was the orders, and the soldier who kept them, and the child who told the truth. The blood of this house is honored when it behaves honorably, and not one moment before. You are welcome to remain for the rights, which are the realm's and not mine to bar you from, but understand that you remain as one who has been answered in the open before all. Let that be the end of it." And it was the end of it. The Duchess of Carrowmere stood the rest of the rights in her place among the kin, because she could not in dignity leave, and she stood them as the one person in that vast assembly who had been publicly and finally answered, and I am told she left for the north the very next morning, before the dew was off the lawns, and that she has not been seen at Harrowgate since, nor invited. I take no joy in that. I want to be clear that I take no joy in it. She was a proud, unhappy woman who had spent her whole life never being refused, and when she was at last refused by an order, by a corporal, by a child, and finally by her queen, she had nothing to fall back on, because pride is a thing that gives you nothing to fall back on. That is its nature and its punishment both. I do not hate her. I pity her, a little now that it is long over. But I do not pretend the realm was not better for her being answered, because a person who has decided to be wronged and who will spend a child to soothe the wrong is a danger to a decent house, and a decent house is right to answer her, and I am glad, not glad of her humbling, but glad of the answering, that mine did. The rites went on. The young of the house made their presentation, in the true old form with no precedence games and no vanity, Prince Joran grave and exact, and Princess Malin walking her brave straight walk, and when she passed before the court this time there was, I think, not a soul present who did not understand what that small girl had done, and the warmth that went toward her was a real thing, a thing she had earned herself by herself, with no one helping her. The boughs were born. The old words were said. The green and silver of the renewing year. And I stood my post on the third step, the salute given and the honor plain, until the last note of the old music faded and the family went back up the stair and in through the east doors, and the rites were over, and I was still, against every expectation of the dawn, a sentry of the king's stair. There are things I must tie off, because a story is not done when the great moment passes. It is done when you have followed the threads out to where they rest. Sergeant Maddox, I learned afterward, was the man who had made the salute possible, for it was Maddox the Queen had summoned at midnight to ask the one thing a sovereign cannot easily know and a sergeant knows in his bones, whether the corporal on the stair was, in truth, the kind of man worth staking a public ceremony on, or whether there was some flaw in him that would shame the crown if the crown stood up for him in the open. The Queen, being wise, did not take the word of the court, which had its factions, nor of the controller alone, who saw me only across a desk. She sent for the man who had marched me out to my post for years, the man who had formed me up and inspected my brass and told me, on the first morning of all this, that I had stood right. And Maddox, hard Maddox, closed-door Maddox, who had told me a sergeant of 30 years thought I stood right, told his queen at midnight whatever it was he told her, and it was evidently enough, for she staked her ceremony on me the next day. I went to him after the rites to thank him, and he would not have it. He said only, in his flat voice, eyes forward out of old habit even off the parade, "I told her the truth, Corporal. You've never given me anything else to tell. Now your brass is dull on the left pouch and you're a disgrace. Get out of my sight." Which, from Maddox, is the warmest thing a man has ever said to me, and we both knew it, and I got out of his sight before either of us disgraced ourselves entirely. Sir Brannock Hale, the controller, sent for me a week later, not to his desk this time but to the long window where he had stood with his back to me on the first day. He looked older, I thought, and gentler. "I offered you the soft way out, Corporal," he said, "and you declined it, and you were right, and I was, if not wrong, then too long in the habit of being only wise. I have made the wise small compromise so many times that I had half forgotten there are things that should not be compromised at all, and that the keeping of them is not rigidity but the spine of everything else. You reminded me. An old man does not always thank a young one for that, but I thank you. Go back to your post." And then, as I reached the door, he added, dry as old paper, "And Corporal, the next time a duchess orders you to salute her, do precisely what you did. But perhaps spare a thought on the long nights for the poor controller who has to clean up after the principles of better men. I have spared him that thought many times since. I think he knew I would." The footman Pell, who had crept to me at the gate each evening with his cargo of bad news, frightened half to death, and loyal past his own interest, I did not forget him. I told the Queen's household, when I was asked later for any account of the affair, exactly what Pell had risked. A frightened indoor servant carrying truth between the powerful and the powerless when carrying it could have cost him his place. He keeps his place still. He keeps it more securely than before. A house that learns to value the corporal who stands the order learns, if it is wise, to value the footman who carries the truth, and Harrowgate under Queen Saralind is a wise house. Pell and I are friends to this day. We do not speak much of those 5 days. We do not need to. And Princess Maelin, my brave, serious Daisy girl, who walked through the hard door when I had given her every easy one, and who carried the truth to her grandmother by herself with no one helping her, because she had decided it was her job. The game between us goes on. I am still on my post, the wall who does not see her, and she still keeps the rule even now, even after everything, because she understands the rule better than ever. She understands now, I think, what the rule is for, having seen with her own eyes what it cost to keep it and what it was worth. But off duty in the lower court, when she comes upon me, we are Edrin and Maelin still. A while after the rites she found me there off duty, and she did not say anything grand. She is 8, she does not make speeches. She just came and stood in front of me serious and looked up and said, "We were both brave, Edrin, like we said." And I knelt down because I was off duty and I was the man and not the wall, and I said, "We were, Maelin, you most of all. You did the bravest thing of anyone." And she considered this with great gravity, and then she grinned the gap-toothed grin, and she said, "I know," and ran off, always running. And I knelt there on the cold flag of the lower court and laughed until I nearly wept, because there is no medicine in all the world like the friendship of a child who tells the truth. I went home the evening of the rites, and I told Anwen everything, the standard, the salute, the applause of the realm, all of it, and she listened the way she listens, with her whole face. And when I had finished, she did not say a grand thing either, because the women of my family, large and small, are not makers of speeches. She just put down her sewing and came and took my face in both her hands the way she does when she means a thing entirely, and she said, "I told you we'd manage." And then she said, "Now go and tell your daughter why you're home with your eyes all red, because she's been worried for a week and won't say so, being yours." And I went and sat on the edge of Bess's bed, my Bess, 6 years old and certain her father is the bravest man in the kingdom, And I told her, in the small words a 6-year-old can hold, the way I had once told Malin that a great lady had wanted me to do a thing I wasn't allowed to do, and that I hadn't done it, even though it was hard and a bit frightening, and that the Queen herself had said I was right. And that being right and being safe are not always the same thing, but that you must try to be right anyway, and that I had tried, and it had come out well this time, though it does not always, and that is all right too, because the trying is the part that is yours. And Bess listened with her serious dark eyes. She has Anwen's eyes, and at the end she said, "So you didn't have to salute the mean lady?" And I said no, I didn't have to salute the mean lady. And she said, satisfied, "Good," and rolled over and went to sleep, the whole vast affair reduced in her clean child's reckoning to exactly its true size. A man hadn't done a thing he shouldn't, and that was good, and now it was time for sleep. I have thought many times since about what it all meant, and I have come slowly to a simple place with it. People think the power in this story was the Queen's, and it was. The Queen's power is what answered the Duchess and saved my post and made the salute into a vindication, and I will be grateful to Queen Saralind to the end of my days. But I have decided that the deepest power in it was not power at all, in the way the Duchess understood power, the power to command and to be obeyed. The deepest power in it was restraint, the power not to do a thing. The Duchess had all the power of command, and it bought her nothing because command is a hollow power, a power that depends entirely on others agreeing to obey, and the moment one corporal would not agree, all her command was revealed as the empty thing it was. And I had no power of command at all. I could command no one. I had only the power to hold still, the power to refuse, the power to keep faith with a thing larger than myself, even when keeping faith cost me everything. That is the power of restraint, and it is the quietest power there is, and I have come to believe it is the strongest, because it is the only power that cannot be taken from you. They can take your post and your wage and your good name. They tried to take all three. They cannot take your refusal to do the wrong thing. That stays yours to the last, and a man who knows it stays his is a man no duchess on earth can truly move. Holt told me long ago when I was 19 and did not understand him, that the guardsman's true weapon is not the rifle but the stillness, that any fool can be taught to fire, but it takes a particular kind of man to be taught to wait. I understand him now completely, in a way I could not have at 19 or even, I think, at the start of those 5 days. The stillness is not nothing. The stillness is everything. The stillness is the whole of it, the held storm, the kept faith, the power that is only the power to do right and not to do wrong, exercised in the one currency a guardsman has, which is the way he holds himself when the whole world is pushing. I held still. The realm saw me hold still and understood what it was seeing, and my queen stood up in the open before everyone and made the holding still into an honor. That is the story, the true shape of it, set down at last by the one man who was there inside it the whole time. I am Corporal Edrin Vael of the household foot, 3rd file of the morning watch, sentry of the King's Stair of Harrowgate Palace. I stand the 3rd step left of the flight in the niche between the 2 old urns, and I do not move, and I do not speak, and I do not break until the sovereign passes, or the standard is borne by, or the honored dead are remembered, and then and only then I lift my hand. That is the order. It is a good order. I kept it when keeping it cost me everything, and a great lady learned, and a court learned, and a child learned, and an old controller remembered, and my queen, God keep her, made it plain before the whole realm, that the salute of this stair belongs to the crown and the dead and nothing else, and that no voice, however loud or however high, can ever buy it. And I am still here. I am still on the 3rd step. If you come to Harrowgate of a summer morning, you will see me, immaculate and unmoving, eyes level on the worn place in the far balustrade, a wall between the disorder of the world and the order of the house behind me. You may try, if you like, to make me smile or flinch or look at you. I will not. I bear you no grudge for trying. There is something in people that needs to test a wall to be sure it is a wall. But know, as you stand at the rope and watch the man who will not move, that the stillness you are looking at is not emptiness. It is the loudest thing I own. It is everything I have ever stood for, held in the one shape I am permitted to hold it. And it is, I have learned, the strongest power in the world, the power to hold still, and to keep faith, and to refuse with perfect quiet to do the wrong thing, no matter who commands it. That is the whole of it now, the bones and the weight both. The morning the Duchess of Carrowmere ordered me to salute her, I did not obey. I want to be precise about that because it is the truest thing I have ever done. I stood the order, and in the end the order stood up for me.